Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Wired Nerdy Podcast. This is season one, episode number 12. My name is Keith. I'm here with my good friend Doug. How is this week treating you, Doug?
It's going good. We've got a couple things to share. 12 episodes, so we're just trucking along.
It's a dozen.
Uh, we also have to put in a little plug for our new website and our merch store.
That's right. That's right. If you look in the body on YouTube, it's also will be on Spotify as well. You will see a variety of links. We have added our new website inside of each one of the videos, both the back catalog and any new going forward. And if
Yep,
you go to that website, not only will it talk about where you can listen, but you can go to our new merch store. You can get cool hats, you can get shirts, you can get hoodies, you can get mouse pads, and it's only going to get better. So definitely,
absolutely. Yeah,
and all the proceeds will go towards helping us support the podcast, helping us with running this thing and the technology that we need and keep our production popping. So yeah, thanks for the plug there, man. I actually kind of
yeah,
slipped
no
my mind.
problem.
It's been one of those weeks. So let's cue up the nerd news, my friend.
Nerd News.
Okay, so you're gonna take number one here. Let's get right into it.
All right, yeah. So Netflix is actually ending their DVD service, and it's been going for 25 years. But I believe it ends late September.
You know what's crazy? I
Um,
I thought they already had.
Yeah, it's not a lot. There's kind of some jokes running around like Reddit and others. It says dozens of people affected by Netflix or
By
single guy misses his DVD collection. So,
grandma.
and my wife actually uses the DVD mail service, and
Really?
she likes it, and I like it too because there are some things that are not on streaming platforms.
That's
So
fair.
it's good to get them on
I was
DVDs.
getting ready
Yeah,
to ask you why. Now I get it. Okay,
yeah.
that's a good justification. So, have you broken the news to your wife yet? Is she,
I did, and she was rather upset.
I
And
figured.
I kind of gave the same joke to her. I'm like, "You're their only subscriber. It's time that they let you go."
Oh my
And she,
gosh,
of course, gave me quite the face. But yeah,
I'm sure she
she's
did.
upset.
Well,
Yeah,
that's awesome. Like, look at me. I thought they had already ended it. So, wow, it is an end of an era, and maybe that speaks to them feeling as though most people have decent internet enough to stream. But I also read, in accordance to that, it's really not on our list, but it is kind of tied. Within the next month, we're talking around June timeframe in the United States, Netflix is going to start cracking down on password sharing.
yep,
It could also be them just trying to control costs, and also, they're on this kick about, people sharing accounts. And
yeah,
so that may get kind of ugly. That'll be interesting. I'm sure we'll talk about that later as it breaks. So
yeah. We can save that for another episode. My only thought, though, is if you're paying for the service, I mean, what's the deal? But we can
we'll get
discuss
into
that at
that.
another issue. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll get into that. Okay, so the next one on the list, there is a very popular video game on the PlayStation that is called New Horizon Forbidden West. It's been out for quite some time. It's a beautiful game, technical marvel. Um, but what's interesting is that they are patching the game for a very unique reason. They are trying to increase accessibility for people who are afraid of water. There's a portion
Hmm.
of the game where you get scuba gear and you can go underwater with this character. Well, people who are scared of water apparently found it very troublesome. And so they're patching the game and they're adding accessibility to where they're increasing the field of view so you can go out further. Your breath does not run out, so you can infinitely be down there. And essentially, it's trying to make you feel less claustrophobic. It's fascinating. It's so funny. These companies are going back and doing these really unique patches. It's not for bug fixes. Like last week, we talked about how they're putting modern t-shirts on The Last of Us. Now they're going into this game, which has been out for a while, and they're patching it to help people not be so afraid of the water. So
Yeah.
what do you think about that, man?
I think that's very interesting because that reminds me of a story, and I just had to look it up. The game Evil West. I don't know if you've heard of it, but they actually let you remove spiders from the game for
Uh-huh.
those suffering from arachnophobia.
Dude, I have Evo West on in my Steam catalog. I haven't played it yet.
Oh, there you go.
And
Yeah.
what the and I was gonna make a joke because I can't stand spiders. If only they could do this for like Skyrim and the big spiders.
Oh,
Or oh
yeah.
my gosh, the worst is the Hogwarts game. The spiders look they're such a pain. I won't go there. We won't talk about that.
But yeah, to wrap it up, I really like that. I mean, if you're scared of it, we don't want to like traumatize you and
That's
scare you
cool.
from playing our game. Yeah. So
Making it
I like
more
it.
open and accessible for people. That's awesome.
Yep.
It's comes from a good place.
Yeah.
So that's cool.
Definitely.
Yeah. So the next one I will also tackle. This has been a rumor for some time now, but it's heating up again, where everybody's saying it may actually happen. For some time now, everybody's been waiting for Apple to jump into the virtual reality game or the augmented reality. If you're unaware, augmented reality is essentially putting digital things on top of the real world, like with the Microsoft HoloLens. So, you know, it's interesting to see which way one of these will go. Obviously, virtual reality is really kind of taken off with the Oculus line, the HTCs, the Steam has their own. But they're now saying that at the developers conference, which is going to be this June, the rumors are that they're going to announce a some sort of augmented reality or VR. They're saying that it'll come. The rumor is it'll come with support for eye and hand tracking and operating system that they're going to call XROS, support for FaceTime calls, reading titles from Apple Books, and of course, playing games. It's going to have an external battery pack that's designed to sit in the user's pocket, and a price point of around $3,000 has been rumored more than once. Now,
Yeah.
regardless of whether this is true, it is always interesting. We've had this conversation about Apple. They design very unique products. It'll be interesting to
Yes.
see what it's like. So,
Yeah, and the price point to me matches. Apple has always seemed to have a higher price point than any other company, but like I said before, their iPhones and their computers, such high quality, I think, and such great design and look and feel. So,
yeah, their stuff lasts. I mean,
yeah,
I've had MacBooks that have lasted me 13 years. I can't tell you if I ever had like just a general business laptop that was Windows based ever last that long. 5 years if
no,
I'm
not at
lucky.
all. Yeah,
So, and with desktops, it doesn't count because desktop Windows, I'm always upgrading it anyway. So,
yeah.
you know, but that's the thing. So, all right, brother, you get the next one. What's on the list?
The next one is interesting. Sonic the Hedgehog Lego sets. They're kind of doing a Sonic the Hedgehog Hot Wheels mix, but it's basically like they're trying to be Hot Wheels, if I'm saying that right. So
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like Legos mashed with Sonic, mashed with Hot
mashed with,
Wheels.
yeah.
It's crazy. Here's my question: Do are they into Sonic nowadays? I mean,
I don't know because Sonic very popular when it came out, but
they
I
had the
think it
movie,
had, yep, a
so
kind of a cult following of not very. It's not as popular as Mario, Well, not Harry Potter. I'm trying to think of things at the same time.
yeah, Donkey
Um,
Kong, like
yeah,
Donkey Kong
maybe,
Country,
yeah.
those kind of things. Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting
So
mashup. So I saw it and I was like, okay, that's cool, but really? Like now? Why now? They
yeah,
did have the movies recently, and I know the movies were relatively well received. There was also the controversy whenever they released the
the
CG.
shoes,
Oh
yeah.
yeah, well his face too. He had like
Oh yes, yeah.
full teeth, and what was interesting about that, if you don't know, everybody on the internet freaked out because Sonic looked ugly. He didn't look like the video game. The studio, to their credit, actually stopped everything and redid all the posts, delayed the movie, and they redid it. And actually, the movies, there's been two of them so far, were very well received. So maybe there was enough good faith with kids that they feel like that's why this works as a toy. I'm not
Yeah.
really sure, but
I mean, looking at them, they look really cool. They've got the Green Hill Zone, so many memories of that, and the music going in the background.
yeah,
Dr. Robotnik's in there. So the people that love Sonic, I know, will probably pick it up,
it's true.
whether they open it or not,
Collectors.
which we'll talk about that later with our guest star.
Exactly. We have a
But
guest today. Yep.
yeah,
All right,
so
brother. Well, our
cool.
last one on the list, which I don't know how I feel about it, I'm kind of iffy. An announcement has been made that there is going to be a Galaxy Quest TV show for real this time, maybe. Paramount Plus. So if you're familiar with this, hopefully you are, Galaxy Quest is like a Star Trek spoof. It's about a group of actors who played in a Star Trek like show. And come to find out, it's all real. These aliens watched their old episodes and recreated their society around it. Got space travel. Basically, ends up kidnapping the whole crew, and they have to save the galaxy. It's an excellent movie. If you haven't seen it,
Yes.
it's got Tim Allen in it, Sigourney Weaver. Oh, such a great movie. But they're turning it into a TV show. I don't know how I feel about that because it's such a great premise and it's an awesome movie. I hope they don't screw it up. I hope it's not
Yeah.
dumb. So you've seen it. Like, what are your thoughts about it, man?
Yeah, like I said, the movie's really good, and I don't know. I hope they get the same actors. Mr. Rickman, I believe, has passed,
He did
so
pass, yeah.
he was a really good character in there. So to not have the same characters, I don't think it'll have the same look and feel and nostalgia as the movie.
Yeah, unfortunately. But, you know, maybe they can maybe they can make it happen. Stranger
Yeah,
things have happened. So,
yeah,
all right, brother. Well, that wraps up our nerd news section for this episode. So, what we have next is our
yeah.
second special guest. Now, this kind of is in line with the theme because we have an upcoming RetroCon that both Doug and I are not only attending, but we're going to be working, helping out somebody in their booth. And so, in that whole theme of video game collecting and retro video games, we decided to have our special guest for this weekend right before our follow episode, which will be about the RetroCon. So, we're kind of staying in that lane of themes. So, here we go. We will introduce our next guest, Kevin. Kevin is special because he has a very unique retro game collection, and it isn't a traditional just cartridges and that sort of thing. He does all kinds of cool stuff, and that's what we're going to get into. So, Kevin, man, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me tonight. I will notice that
Yeah.
Doug is family, so I get some of the swag early. I got my
Oh
Wired Nerdy
yeah,
podcast sticker up here on my hat, so I'm trying to rip the brand a little bit.
we
We,
appreciate that.
definitely, we appreciate that, but we will get you a T-shirt for being a guest on the show. We really appreciate it. That's
That's
what we get
fine.
for
Absolutely,
I'll wear
yeah.
free.
that thing
So,
all over.
so let's just kind of like dive into it, man. So, first of all, what do you collect, and how did you get started?
Well, I guess I've always been somewhat of a collector because when I was a kid and you'd get the video games and whatnot, I never would like, sell them to buy the next new thing. I'd always keep them and then just eventually work my way up. I may not be the first kid on the block to, get the new console or whatever, but I always kept all my other stuff. And fortunately, I still have some of the cardboard and boxes and whatnot for those games. And I mean, a lot of my collection is stuff that I've had since I was a kid and all grown up. I just tried to take care of it. And
Cool.
sometimes it's
So they're
hard to do
complete.
though with a kid. Yeah,
Oh
I
yeah,
have a
cool,
lot of complete things. So
dude.
it's definitely nice. People go
That's
nuts
awesome.
for
And what is it?
cardboard these
What's your
days.
what's your preferred go-to? Do you have like one set console? I know Doug mentioned it was NES, but what's your preferred?
I do like the NES as far as that's definitely the cartridges that I have the most of, but probably the Nintendo 64 is the one that I have the most
Mm,
box art
yeah.
from and everything for all the ones when I was a kid. But I still look back and kick myself for all those things, especially being a collector now. When you're a kid, you don't think about, oh, I'm gonna want this insert or the cardboard art or anything like that. I mean, if you like the art or whatever, you may cut up the box and like put some push pins and stick it on your wall as a kid or whatever. So,
Oh yeah, the
some of
posters
that stuff
especially,
doesn't
right?
get saved because you're not necessarily thinking about it when you're, a youngster.
Exactly. I remember there was a Dragon Warrior game for the NES, and it had a poster with it. And man, if you ever look up how much those go for, I remember my brother and I had that. If you look up like complete sets for some of that stuff, especially if it's unopened, holy cow, some of those things are.
Well, and some of those things inside, like you get the inserts, there's little, not just the booklets and the paper and the plastic and everything that goes with the game. Some of them had like special issue stickers or comic
Yep.
books and whatnot that go in there. And
Yeah.
I mean, those are the things that, the people want that want a complete box. Like, they want all that stuff. So they're willing to pay top dollar for some of that. I'm more of a thriftier gamer, but going back to your original question, NES is what I have the most carts for, but I've collected everything under the sun. It mainly falls under video games as far as the nerdy realm of everything. And I've collected all kinds of different consoles from old schools, Ataris, into the Nintendo, of course, and then Super Nintendos, and then more obscure things like the Philips CDI, which was a
Oh
CD-ROM
wow.
based.
Oh man.
And
Yeah.
Nintendo actually worked with Philips Magnavox
Hmm.
back then, trying to form a disc uh,
Yep.
console, and then eventually that fell through, and they turned around and turned it into the Sony PlayStation. That's
That's
kind
right.
of the
That's
history
right.
of
Yeah.
all that. And I've had
That's right.
Atari Jaguars and
Hmm.
uh, what is it? The Panasonic 3DO. I've had those in lots of
Oh,
games,
yep.
but it seems like sometimes I'll have some of those cooler, more odder things, and then I'll end up trading them to other collectors for other things to, build up other things I'm more interested in or play with. I'm kind of a sucker for, I really want to play with the stuff I collect as opposed to,
Yeah.
uh, just sitting there and let it collect dust.
Yeah.
Yeah, what I'm hearing here, and we have a lot more questions, is that we may have an expert we can recall in the future.
Oh,
Oh,
definitely.
absolutely.
All this
I love
technology and all this information. Yeah.
I'm actually not very good on the technical side, so when I listen to your all's podcast, I actually get schooled quite a bit on, how the
Oh,
computer
yeah.
business and everything works and how some of those things go about, and I'm just kind of blown away. But when it comes to video games, I really like that. That's kind of the passion and the hobby, and I haven't actually got to talk uh, verbally with somebody about video games or game collecting in a long time. It's mainly just on like chat boards or Facebook groups and
Yeah.
whatnot. I'm in a private collecting group that's just amazing, but verbally, I mean, I'm not surrounded by a lot of people that play video games or collect them, so it's nice to be able to, you know, hash some of this stuff out with other folks who may be interested.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Definitely.
So you've sent us some pictures ahead of time. I'm looking at this one. You've got all kinds of display unit for a Nintendo and all kinds of games and cartridges and boxes. What is like a rare piece or special controllers you have in there?
Well, I guess, I mean, if you're a Nintendo person like a NES, the one thing you wanted to have if you watched The Wizard, the movie The Wizard with Fred Savage, and go into the
Yeah.
thing, it's the Power Glove. And as
Yep.
they said, it's so bad. Is what that was the catch line. But
Yeah,
that's
it
one of those
didn't really
things.
live up to the hype. Yeah.
Yeah, it did not live up to the hype. I mean, but definitely you can see where that technology grew and then eventually kind of
Mhm.
turned into, how the Nintendo Wii went with the motion
Yep.
sensors and everything, and then everybody else kind of jumped on board with the motion sensor stuff, and now it's, derived in a lot of the consoles that we have today and
Yeah.
whatnot. So it was cool to kind of see its infancy. There were other things. Nintendo, they put out what was called a rolling rocker, and it's basically
Hmm.
like a balancing platform, and by tilting your body left or right or forward or back, kind of like a Segway or a hoverboard, that
Oh
controlled your
man.
character. So I've played the original Mario before with my little character running across the screen just by me like leaning on this board and trying to, jump up and whatnot. And then of course the old school like the power pad, where most people
Power
didn't
pad.
actually
Yeah.
run on the dot.
Track
They'd
and
get down
field.
on their knees and like put their
Yeah.
hands on it and try to do it,
Yep.
trying to do the track and field. But
Yep.
I mean, a lot of my controller or the interesting controller stuff is things like that, really oddball things that, we're just trying
Yeah.
to reach out to basically just trying to push the limits back then, even though now it
Yeah.
kind of looks cheesy. Probably the oddest thing that I have in there is like a Nintendo brand. How would I say that? Like almost like a crochet pattern, like it's a
Oh.
book that you open up
Oh.
and it's got all the, or it's like a push pin, and it's kind of like, oh, what's the thing where you put the yarn? The old
Oh.
ladies would do it and
Yeah.
whip stitch and stuff, and they'd
Yeah, I
make
think
the
I know what you're
patterns and
talking. Yeah.
Yeah.
everything. Yeah, but it's a
Yeah.
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 Nintendo one of those, so
Knitting.
it's kind of
Oh, that's
it's
cool.
full of just oddball stuff, but still cool.
And you also have display cabinets or what was in retail stores. I know one of the photos you have like what looks like an OG like in a Kmart or a Walmart for a Nintendo. Like, man, that takes up so much. I'm assuming you have a room dedicated for this stuff, right?
Yes, I do have a dedicated room, and sometimes it just depending on how the collection fluctuates. Sometimes it's super full and you can hardly get around. But other times, the it kind of dwindles down and you can maneuver stuff around and actually get some stuff done in there. But yeah, that Nintendo cabinet, it's actually not a retro one. It's more of a um, 2000s, late 2000s one.
Okay.
There was actually a store closing, and I was able
Ah.
to pick up that kiosk when the store closed. They probably had like 30 of those kiosks, and it's kind of a
Oh
generic
man.
cabinet, but the
Yeah.
glass, the light up glass is the main part of it. And actually, when this store was closing, it was kind of like all sales are final, and it was first come, first serve. So I bought that one really quick because I knew I wanted it, especially for the Nintendo marquee.
Yeah.
And they're like, but you can't take it out until the end of the month. And I'm like, what do you mean? I just bought this. They're like, oh, you can't take it out till the end of the month. Well, what happened was I go back to pick it up on my date when I had set up
Mhm.
with the store to go pick it up. Well, there it is with my name on it and everything. The Nintendo marquee's gone. And I'm like,
Oh.
I don't want this.
Yeah.
I mean, I just
No.
put hundreds of dollars down for this,
Yeah.
and you all would not let me take it out of the store at the time. But they're like, well, it's still here. I'm like, that doesn't matter. The
No.
marquee was the
Is
main
what you wanted.
piece that
Yeah.
you needed. Well, they ended up going back through security footage and finding somebody that took it, just like stole it. But
Yep.
they
Yeah.
actually knew it because it was a local game collector themselves who had
Oh my
stole
goodness.
it. So the cops went and got it back
Oh
from that
Wow.
man.
person. So I that's
That's a crazy
that's
story.
kind of an interesting, crazy story on how I ended up with that marquee itself. And you can kind of tell that it's just kind of a generic one, other than the marquee,
Mhm.
because just below it, I'm sure severe hardcore fans will probably notice there's like a little banner on it that says "Greatness Awaits," and I think that's more of a PlayStation logo and stuff. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
but I
Yeah.
always left it in there because I hadn't really found anything else to put in there yet. But maybe sometime.
Really
Very
cool.
cool. Good story. All right, Doug, you're up with the next one, buddy.
All right. I think we kind of touched on it, but what kind of got you into collecting? Kind of reiterate that
As an adult. So you mentioned as a
as
Yeah,
an
as
kid,
an
adult. Yeah.
adult.
you were very
Yeah.
particular as a kid, right?
Yes.
And you were, but what made you continue that on into adulthood to amass it? I mean, obviously you still have the love for it.
Well, other than just keeping what I already had, growing up, um, I really didn't set out until collecting until about 13 years ago, probably about
Hmm.
2010. I moved from um, all around for my work and whatnot, and my wife and I ended up in Florida, northern Florida. Well, northern Florida is full of flea markets. And they're
Yeah.
not like
Yeah.
flea markets you think around the Midwest or whatever. You go
Yeah.
in and there's a bunch of booths and whatever, and you pick up what you want and you go to the front. It's like a state fair almost, but it's like every weekend.
Mm.
I mean, these are like state fair grounds with set up buildings and everything, just acres and acres and acres of a building, and every place inside, there's hundreds of, shop vendors and whatever. And they may be selling new stuff, they may be selling old stuff, but it's all kind of open, walk through, and you can even get corn dogs and funnel cakes. I mean, it's kind of like a carnival,
Oh,
but it's every
It's
quite
like
the
an
weekend and it's
event.
just
experience.
hundreds of people. Well, I got to go into those and I was picking up Nintendo games on the cheap because nobody wanted them,
Mm,
13 years ago very much. They were still like $3 a piece. And
sure.
I'm like, you know what? Now is the time. I wouldn't mind. At first, I started out collecting. I'm like, I want to get every Nintendo game. Like that was
Yeah.
my goal to get every
Hmm.
Nintendo game. But other things just kept popping up along the
Sure.
way. There'd be, an old Nintendo or a PlayStation
Hmm.
or something there sitting there for $5 or $10, and I'm like, okay, grab it up. But it became like a weekend hobby thing, going around and just finding gaming stuff at these huge, giant flea markets. And even when you weren't in the buildings, the outside was just people that rolled up like a garage sale. They'd lay down a tarp and just
Hmm.
start laying stuff down. One of the coolest
Wow.
things I found was I was walking by and I see this Virtual Boy, the old school Nintendo
Oh,
Virtual Boy.
yep.
Some
The red
people, a
screens.
lot of
Hmm.
people didn't have it that I knew, but everybody went and played it at Walmart or a game store, and you'd walk up and put your
Yeah.
face in the VR headset, and there was a little controller down here, and it
Yep.
possibly give you a seizure depending on who you were because of the red and
Yeah. That
black.
red color, a little
Yeah,
different.
Yeah.
but there was a box there, and I was like, kind of looked at it and I got real excited and I opened up the box and here's this. Virtual Boy, and it's even got the neoprene like eye cups and everything, still in great shape.
Wow.
And I looked at the guy, and I said, "How much for the Virtual Boy?" And I mean, he was just kind of looking around. There's all kinds of other stuff laying out, and he's like, 15 bucks." And I'm like, "All
Oh
right,
man.
yeah, 15
Yeah.
bucks, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah." Like, yeah,
Jeez.
I'll definitely
Good
take
lord.
that. And man, I remember holding that thing like it was a, Heisman Trophy winner football, trying to get to my car, trying to make sure
All right.
nobody's gonna jump me for this Virtual Boy. But it was kind of back when I I mean, game collecting wasn't dead, but it's nowhere near like it was nowhere near what it is now. Like, and how
Gotcha.
crazy people get about
Well,
everything. But
and I just
that's kind
quickly
of how
looked
I
it
got
up.
into it.
So I quickly looked it up. You dropped 15 bones on that Virtual Boy today, according to price charting. The loose price is $272.
Man.
The
Yeah.
CIB price was just lightly used but good condition, $600. But if it was sealed new, $1,200.
Yeah,
You got a hell of a deal.
I
I did.
mean, that's crazy, man.
I did.
What
Yeah.
a
I got in
story.
on it when it was a lot cheaper than it is now. Definitely. I
So
mean,
what's your
even back then, I
so
mean,
you
you could still
started in
get a
flea
Virtual Boy
markets?
for under 100.
You could. So you started in flea markets, but that kind of segues into what are your methods? Is that still your method today? I know you've moved from Florida. You're in a different part of the country. You are right. Different sets of the country have obviously better pulls, right? Are you still doing that same method with flea markets or are you online? Like what's your method today when you're looking for something or browsing? You mentioned you trade with other collectors. How do you go about it today and how have you evolved with your collecting?
Well, evolving whenever I moved out of Florida. I lived in Florida for 3 years, so it was quite a long time to amass a lot of stuff. And, I didn't
Yeah.
have kids or anything, so I just
Mhm.
had a lot of excess income to kind of blow.
Yeah.
Looking back now, I was like, you probably should have saved some of it, but uh, you wouldn't have the same awesome collection.
Well, right. Yeah.
You can't take the money with you, but maybe you can be buried with a pile of games on in your coffin.
Well, your
But
kids might
or
want it,
maybe that's my kid's inheritance. Yeah.
There you go.
Oh, but over time, and I moved back, it became more like garage sales or
Yep.
picking things up. But it's actually slowed since the market's picked up in the last like
Mhm.
6 years. It's hard to get good prices because a lot of people know what they have and they know people pay a lot of money for them. So I do a lot. Most of my stuff over the last few years have definitely just been trading with other collectors as opposed to actually going out and shopping and buying. I also had a mother-in-law who went to a lot of like local flea markets and stuff around her town and garage sales, and she always kept an eye out for me. So she'd pick me up. She would
There
still
you go.
even be able to pick me up like a Nintendo for 20 bucks with all the cables and everything. And I was just
Wow.
amassed like all these stacks and stacks of these consoles,
Yeah.
which kind of led into my other stuff
I like
that I
the
ended
idea of
up
you
doing.
outsourcing your collecting
Yeah.
to
Oh, absolutely.
cast that net,
And
right?
this isn't with Nintendo, but it goes right up along with nerdiness and all things nerdy. One time she called me and she said, "I have a crate here, and there's 150 Star Wars ornaments in their boxes. Would you
Oh,
like
Oh
it?" And
man.
I'm like, "Well, how much
yeah.
is it?" And she's like, "Oh, it's like 75 bucks." And I'm like, "Heck yeah!" I want
Yeah.
the whole
Yeah.
crate. She's like, "How many do you want?" I said, "I
Yeah.
want them all.
All of them.
Get the whole
Yeah.
box." So now I have a dedicated Christmas tree topped with a Darth Vader helmet and
That's
all
awesome.
just all these kinds
That's
of
really
Star
cool.
Wars ornaments all around. So I have this whole Star Wars Christmas tree that
That's
gets
so
to be
cool.
lit up and showed off for a month a year.
That's so cool. That is awesome.
So
So
yeah, she
while you're
definitely came through in lots of ways.
That's awesome. While you're collecting all this stuff, kind of looking back in your entire history, what is like the thing that you're most proud of? Like, I was able to find this, I got it. Do you have something in your collection that you
Your
will
white
never
whale.
get rid of? Yeah.
Is it that power glove?
It's probably not the Power Glove.
Okay.
The I feel like the Virtual Boy is probably the best story overall, and just like
Oh
it's
yeah.
one of those shining moments when the
Yep.
clouds part open and the sunbeam comes down,
Oh.
and it's just like,
Yeah.
ah. But especially looking back on it, but I can't think of any one thing that I necessarily, love more than the other. There's definitely games I play more than the other, but um, there's probably not anything that really stands out moments and look
Oh,
back on
okay.
like one pickup, but
Is there something you want to add to your collection that's still you're looking for? That's your white whale. Is it? Are you one of those like gold Zelda cartridge kind of people, or
I I honestly would love a pinball machine. And it's
oh,
Oh,
not so much about finding them, it's about affording them because pinball
sure.
machines are extremely ridiculous in price. And I mean, the newer ones are just amazing because, a lot of times they're associated with a band like Metallica or
hmm,
Primus or Aerosmith
yeah.
and AC/DC, and they're jamming the tunes while you're doing the ball, but there's also an old one called Medieval Madness that I really like to have. So it's less video games, but still
That's fair.
arcadish. And
It's part of
that's
the
like the
collection.
one thing
Yeah.
is like, man, I would love to have a pinball machine uh, on a smaller scale, a little cheaper scale, uh, much more doable. I was over at Doug's house recently, and I got to experience his multi arcade again,
Mhm.
and
It's
I could see
tabletop, right?
myself really need
Yeah.
one of those in my future. And then over time, when I was down in Florida, I picked up a lot of arcade cabinets as well,
Yeah.
and it just became one of the things. So I don't know.
That's
I don't
awesome.
have any more arcade cabinets. I've downsized quite a bit,
Sure.
especially when you're moving multiple states
They take a lot of
over.
space too,
So
right?
yeah, it's definitely been some downsizing. And I've had kiosks before, like a PlayStation 2 store kiosk, and then the whole thing was like a silver steel
Oh,
tower with the light up
oh,
blue PlayStation 2. And I mean, it was just a chunk, and I'm like, there's nowhere to put this stuff anymore because I had literally like become a hoarder and like hoarded all this video game stuff and all these
Right.
kiosks and everything, and I was feeling squished, and I was like, I can't do anything. So I don't know.
So to expand
Sometimes
on
it
your
can
collect,
overwhelm on you.
yeah. I
yeah,
could see that.
I'm going to expand on this question a little bit. What do you think about people who collect emulators and ROMs? I mean, they're still trying to relive the good old days and the nostalgia, but do you believe that's the same, or do you want the physical item?
Honestly, I mean, there's something to be said about taking a physical cart and jamming it in the slot or pulling
He's
it
a
out even though
Yes.
purist.
you're not supposed to and just blowing on it and
Right.
trying to get it to do and then jamming it back in there. Uh, but I have no problem with emulators. I mean, a lot of people um, get mad sometimes about it. I'm not been out of shape about it, especially because games have become so expensive these days. Sometimes it's really the only way somebody can afford to enjoy a game. And if the
Hmm.
emulator
Yeah.
itself, isn't buggy or glitchy, I mean, I've seen some that I've tried to play and I'm like, this is just too glitchy. I can't do it,
Yeah.
put it down. But then others are done real nice and it runs
Hmm.
smooth. And that's really the only way somebody can afford to enjoy that game. So they definitely have a place to me and a purpose. And same way with those multicades. I mean, you can play 1,000 different arcade games like Doug has on
Yeah.
his. I mean,
Yep.
there's no way you could fit 1,000 arcades into
No.
your
Yeah.
into your home.
Yep.
I don't care. I mean, you'd have to have a warehouse. I mean, not even just a mansion.
Yeah.
You'd have to have a warehouse full for a
I
thousand
have it in my
arcades.
pocket for my Steam Deck. I've got like a
Ah,
thousand
nice.
on that Steam Deck, man.
I know you all were talking about that on your last episode and a few
Yeah.
episodes before that, and I've heard lots of good things about the Steam Deck. So I'm kind of
It's
jealous whenever you talk about
it's
it.
great for retro. I will tell you that. If you're into it's good for modern too, but it's great for retro. But you are right though about the space, the eternal battle you probably have with your collection and trying to manage your space. I can only imagine that. But as a segue, one thing that's really unique. Not only do you have a traditional collection, you do something that's actually very interesting, and we're going to put photos up. You customize console shells and you have got some amazing work. How did you get into this? Where did this idea come from? I mean, we'll put up pictures. You've got everything from Mega Man to Yoshi, Donkey Kong, Final Fantasy, Punisher, Marvel. Like, dude, how'd you get into this? Where did this start?
Well, it all kind of started back when I was in Florida, and I, was just so hardcore into just collecting games, and then I would just look up all the stuff all the time online. And one time I was on this blog or whatever, and somebody, I think his name was like Platinum Fungi or something, if you want to Google it, if your listeners
It's an
want to
awesome
Google it.
name.
But he had done like a Nintendo, a regular Nintendo, so you had the big flat gray top,
Hmm.
and he had cut squares to make it look like the pixelated Link from the
Oh,
original Legend of Zelda. And
awesome.
he had painted like the box silver itself, and did some of the colors in down below it. And I'm like, I could do something like that. I think that's really cool. I mean, it'd give me something to do for my spare time. And I was just like, I think I could do this, on a larger scale, and I could make all these consoles that I've collected for 10 or 20 bucks, and I could make them, pretty instead of just having a stack of gray boxes. I could make these and display them. And there definitely was a learning curve with the situation. As you can tell, the first one I did was a Mario one, and it's kind of just Mario on the flat face, and he's kind of got a wiggly mustache. And on the flip lid of the Nintendo, I put like a Nintendo logo across it. Well, I did this by using a Dremel, like putting a stencil down on it, dremeling out
Mhm.
the plastic,
That's awesome.
and
You
painting the
etched that by
console.
hand?
Yeah, with a Dremel. But then I do the rough with the Dremel, and then you go back in with small files like square files or triangle files or whatnot that you get in a hobby store, and then work out the hard edges, or you know use little strips of sandpaper and
Hmm.
sandpaper to make it kind of smooth on the edge. And the first one, I really didn't like the way it turned out. I thought, oh, this is bad, but I kept it because I'm like, this is part of the process, and I thought I can improve on this. I've learned from my mistakes, but the one thing I do love about it is it's the one I actually went in inside. So before you paint or do any of the dribbling, you have to completely dismantle
Yep.
everything and take it all
Yep.
apart and set
Yeah.
everything to the side is the
Yep.
best way to do it. I've seen some people not do that, but it's just best to
Mm,
try and keep the paint and
yeah.
everything away from the boards.
Not a good idea. Yeah.
But I went in and I was feeling brave, so I went to Radio Shack back in the day when you could actually go to a corner
Yep.
store and get something at Radio Shack. And I got a little green LED light. It's just a teeny tiny little light, and it's got two
Mhm.
prongs. And I thought, you know, and at that time I was like, I have so many Nintendos, like it's not gonna matter if I mess one up while I'm trying this,
Yeah.
just whatever. So then I actually unsoldered the existing like red power light on the Nintendo and soldered in a green light on the board. And I mean,
Huh.
That's
it was
awesome.
super, super simple. All kinds of YouTube videos can show you
Yeah.
how to do simple solder. And I did that. So then on the front of the console itself that I did with the Mario, I cut out a mushroom
Mhm.
symbol
I see
on
that.
there, a toad. And so whenever you power it up, it looks like a green one-up mushroom.
Dude.
And a lot of that, all I did
So
was
cool.
cut out the outside shape, almost like carving a pumpkin.
Yeah.
Um, so you cut out that basic shape, but then I put in flat, clear plastic so the light would shine through the mushroom shape. But then I went back and put out like the little mushroom circles in the eye and the mouth or whatnot in plastic, and I painted those as well, and then glued them on to the clear plastic. So then it added more of the actual toad look whenever the power's not on as well.
It
And
looks
I thought
unbelievable.
that was really when I was like, "Ooh, I could do something even cooler now." And that's
Get
when
even more creative.
I did the Zelda one with the big like makeshift Highland
Hmm.
shield on
Yep.
the top. And
Yep.
I basically started out with that one and just cut out the shield shape itself, and then for like the silver layer underneath, like the silver border of the shield,
Hmm.
it's actually just flat, clear hobby plastic that
Mm.
I had cut out the shape and did the same methods with the file and sandpaper and whatnot, and painted it silver, painted it chrome, and then
Hmm.
I used some of the thicker plastic left over from the main Nintendo shell that I started out with to build some of those bigger pieces, and then as I painted them or whatever what color they needed to be, and I'd place them back in there as they went. And on that one I did
It
a
look.
Zelda on the front. I
Yep.
showing it to folks at the time. I did get a little heat because I put Zelda on there instead of Link, because it's a Link. I was going for the Adventures of Zelda, but it was super hard. Like I didn't have a Dremel at that point, fine enough to do
Yeah.
the adventures to fit on the flip lid. So I went
You
with
know, it
Zelda. So
works.
I've actually thought about going back and doing it and putting Link on the flip lid instead of
Yeah.
Zelda, buying a
Yeah.
replacement flip lid,
And then
doing
redoing it.
Link, and I think it would
Hmm.
just make it look even better. And on that one, I started doing the controller as well, take the whole controller part and I made it like a
Hmm.
forest green
It looks
and
great.
whatnot. So
Now, these
yeah,
are just
that
on display. You don't sell them, right?
no,
These are
I
just
don't
for
sell them.
your
I just keep
personal
them in my
enjoyment, right?
house. Yes,
They're
they are just for
beautiful.
my personal enjoyment. And
So many listeners are going to be sad.
I
Yes,
I
definitely.
know, but it's actually, if I can do it, a lot of folks can do it. I'm not going to say everybody can do it because some
Sure.
people,
Just aren't
may not have
artistic.
the
Yeah.
patience. I mean, it does
Yeah.
take a lot of patience because you're doing some fine
Yeah.
Dremel cutting or filing or sanding. But I mean, anybody, I mean, it's all basic skills, and all of it's done with, um, just those basic tools like I taught or told you, and you
Hmm.
need like a Phillips, and then you will need like the Nintendo security bit, but you can buy those on Amazon.
Yep.
It's like a little screwdriver, a special screwdriver for like, I don't know, you probably get them for under $5 if you're a
Wow.
Prime member or something, or you could definitely get them online somewhere for
Oh, yeah. You can get them.
very very
Yep.
for like peanuts.
Yep.
And
Yep.
a lot of times the paint that I was using uh, was just like regular Rust-Oleum or the
Hmm.
Krylon or whatever brands that you can
Hmm.
get at any hardware store or
Sure.
Walmart or anywhere, and just depends on what you want as far as the gloss or a matte finish and whatnot. I think I played around with a couple different ones on how they did. I think the Donkey Kong one I did was a gloss black,
Hmm.
and then the Punisher one I did was a matte black. I definitely
Wow.
like, for my taste, I like the matte better than the gloss after doing some of that. I also learned some things from like the Donkey Kong one that I did because the brown doesn't show up against the black as much. So if I had to do it over again, I'd probably do Donkey Kong as like a canary yellow,
Yeah. Make it pop
like
a little
the
more.
thing, and then it would make his face, the image pop a little more, and the brown of it, his hair and stuff wouldn't be drowned out by the black. But I really do like my Punisher one. I
No.
think that's.
That is
I
really
mean, the
cool.
Zelda one's nice.
Yep.
I like the Punisher one a lot because it. You kind of mentioned last time Doug likes firearms. I also like firearms because we're family.
Yeah.
We both grew up with,
Yep.
respecting firearms, but it was a big part of,
Yes.
people gathering on like a Sunday
Hmm.
afternoon and doing target
Sure.
practice and everybody hanging out and having dinner at grandma's. But on that one, I actually incorporated real 45 casings for the A and
Wow.
B buttons on the Nintendo, and I did that by taking the original, like you'd think the red A and B button on a Nintendo
Hmm.
controller, and dremeling them around, and I had cut my casings down to where there was
Wow.
only, a little bit left, and then I could adhere it to the
Hmm.
original red buttons, and
Ah.
I really like the way it looks. I mean, it does play. I wouldn't want to play for hours with 45 casings on my thumb as
Yeah.
opposed to the
Yeah.
red buttons, but it does work. Everything I make is functional. While I was doing, had all the guts and stuff in out, I'd redo the 72 pin connectors and everything. I'd either
Hmm.
replace them if they needed to or rework
Yep.
them.
Yeah. Redo the
So
caps.
I
Just get it
wanted
all.
everything to be
Yeah.
functional. I wanted to be able to take it off the shelf, plug it in, and go to town with it.
Well, they look
And
amazing.
that's the way I was.
They look great.
The other, I mean, I also like my Mega Man one. I think it's awesome as well because on that is the one where I started to incorporate things on the side, like writing on the side on the Mega Man one.
Yeah.
I actually put the Capcom logo down the side because there's so
Yep.
much more plastic to
Yeah.
use as
More
far as
real estate. Hmm.
the art. Yeah, so I mean, I started to incorporate all that stuff, and using more on one side, it's like his power projectiles that he shoots, and then the other side is the Capcom. Same way on the Punisher. On one side, I did the Marvel, the hardcore red block letter
Hmm.
Marvel, and then down the opposite side, I did more like the Sanskrit comics, like you'd see on
Yeah.
Marvel Comics logo, and it was canary yellow and really popped against all the silver and white that I had on there.
Well, you
They
definitely
look
have a
really
talent.
good.
You have a talent for sure. I know you're passing it off and being humble, saying anybody could do it. I know that I could not, and I know I wouldn't have the patience for it. But you definitely have an artistic uh, eye and the way that you go about this. They look amazing. So
Well, thank
Yes,
you. I
definitely.
was proud of some of them. Some of them are more of a learning experience, and then
sure.
some of them are like, you know what, that one turned out all right. The Mega Man is
Yep.
another one. Um, the second Mario one that I did was a whole lot better. Um,
Hmm.
you can probably throw up an image of
I
that, and you
will.
can see like a
Yep.
Yeah.
contrast of the first Mario versus the second Mario I did.
Yeah.
But
It's growth.
the M that I did on the front of the second Mario on the flip lid instead of doing the Nintendo, I put the M on there. I think I'd like to do something to the Mega Man one, like I was talking about with the Zelda, going back and putting Link across the flip lid instead of
Yep.
Zelda. I think I'd like to incorporate like a double M for like Mega
Oh,
Man on the flip lid.
yeah.
Um, and
That would
incorporate
be
that,
very.
because it just kind of looks blank right now, and
Mhm.
everything else is so beautiful and pops, and then you have that blank, and I'm like, I
Yeah.
feel like I could go back now and kind of spruce it up a bit.
You sound like a perfectionist, a true
I,
artist.
I, sometimes I am.
Just a little bit. Yeah. All right. So that's pretty cool. It looks like you kind of got it down pat. Um, moving on from that, we last saw you and we talked about you in our cosplay and
You
our
were
trip to.
featured.
Oh,
Yes,
I did
we
see
showed your
that.
picture.
Yes, I
So,
appreciate that.
can we talk about how you design your own cosplay or what cosplays you've done in the past?
Yeah. As you were talking about from the one that you had shown in a previous episode, I was Bebop from like the 90s Ninja Turtle. I didn't
Ninja
have all
Turtles.
the
Yeah.
hog hair and whatnot on me, but I had pretty much all the other get up as best as I could. And it was more so just, buying fake grenades and, finding clothing items that was easier to find, that you might find in a clothing store as opposed to actually fabricating things. The only thing I fabricated this time was like a giant yellow nose ring that would stay in
That
my
was,
nose all
yeah,
day, but it was super, super noticeable. And I've actually done that one quite a few times. I really like that costume. Sometimes it'll be on Halloween, but other times it'll
Yeah.
be at like a Comic Con or whatnot. Um, but I'd really like
I
to get
liked
into the,
your shoulders. I like the
yes,
real
the turtle
the
shells.
real
shells
They
too.
weren't
turtle
like
shells.
Yeah,
Yes.
they were real. Like you had
The first time
shellacked
I
them and
wore that,
everything.
I only had one, and it was a snapping turtle shell. And so when I
oh,
first had that costume and made it, I only had one real turtle shell. But I went with it and just, it's
Hmm.
still got a lot of looks, but
Yeah.
the
yeah,
double ones that I
definitely.
have, and I had shellacked them so they're super shiny and pop.
Hmm.
And
They look good.
I really
Yeah,
like it. I feel good when I'm wearing that. I don't know, Bebop's kind of a cheesy character, but I
yeah,
kind of like him anyway. And he just
That's
kind of
awesome.
seems to fit my personality, not taking anything too seriously. Sometimes when he messes up, and he's like, "Oh, whatever." But it's always cool.
yeah,
Where you going to get those titles? But anybody
yeah,
who didn't watch the old '90s
Yep.
serials is going to be like, "What's he talking about?" But
Yeah.
yeah, but
Demographically, I'm sure this
I would
audience would
really
know what you're
like to
talking
get
about.
into foam work. You
Yeah.
see like the suits of armor or just
Yeah.
extra pieces
yeah,
or foam weapons, things like that. I mean, as you could see at that Kansas City Planet Comic Con,
yeah,
I mean, it was just amazing what people
It's
come up with.
incredible.
And then you'd have the vendors booths, and I mean, it
Yep.
looked like
Yep.
movie prop
hmm,
stuff, but it was all made out of just paint and foam.
Yeah.
I tried my hand at that. One one Halloween, and I'll try to get you all a pic so you can throw it up now.
Sure.
But I did. If anybody watched like the Clone Wars, Star Wars, the
Hmm.
Clone Wars cartoon,
yep,
Yep.
I did Obi-Wan Kenobi's armor. Like they had the Jedi armor. It kind of looked like white stormtrooper armor, but the shoulder
Yeah.
pads
I
and stuff,
remember.
had the
You had
Jedi
the
Order
front. Hmm.
symbol and
Hmm.
whatnot. And I tried to make one of those out of,
Hmm.
just foam mats and stuff that I had. It was difficult. As much as you say I'm artistic and everything, you're gonna see if I dig up this picture and hand it to you, you're gonna be like, yeah, that one could use a little more work on there, Kevin. But
yeah,
it's definitely something I would like to do in the future and and play with. The thing that I did ended up being it while it was large, it was very basic, but it was a learning curve on
Yeah.
learning how to paint it to where it didn't crack
Yeah.
and what to do and the way to heat it and try to shape the
Yeah.
armor in the way to where it would fold over, your body. And I didn't have a mannequin for my body, so I was having to kind of like put stuff halfway on and then
Yeah.
adhere it together, and then take it off and put it back on, and then try to see how it would fit. So it was definitely a learning experience.
Yeah. I'm
But
sure if you did a few times, you'd probably get it down though. I'm
I really do like dressing up. I think it's cool. One of the things from Comic Con this last time, I mean, my bebop costume got noticed by so many people, and it was awesome. People be like,
wanting
"Oh my
photos, right?
goodness, it's Bebop! We want to come up. Can we take a photo with you?" And I'm like, "Heck yeah, get on in here!" And you do the pose or whatever. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
cosplayers, if they're in a costume, they'll
Yep.
want to do like their certain pose for whatever their character's doing. And I mean, it's just a great feeling inside. And you don't really feel like if you're wearing it down the street, you're walking in, you're afraid people are going to be like nerds or whatever. But the good thing about that size of a Comic Con, there's plenty of other people walking around the
Oh
street, so
yeah.
there
Yep.
it's like everybody's out in costume, so it's kind of like
Yep.
Halloween. You don't feel as bad then.
It is, and that's my favorite thing. We talked about that with the culture. Everybody's polite. Everybody is kind when you go to those things, and people will compliment you, and you don't feel out of place, and you're able to do something like that. I think that's one of the beauties of going to those types of conventions for sure, is being able to, really kind of mingle with your own and not worried about being judged too much, and having people with the same interests as you. It's pretty cool. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I
that
think
was actually.
no, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that's actually the first one me and my family have been to in a while. We had kind of taken a break for a while because COVID hit, and then they didn't have it, and then they had it like at a reduced capacity. So this was like
Yeah,
seemed like the first one that it was like, oh, it's back,
it's
and
big.
it's
Yeah.
the closest one to us, so it's
Yep.
Yeah.
the easiest one to make it to because you can travel to it without having to put up like
Yep.
hotel stay and everything like that.
Yep. It's drivable. So, go ahead,
And it
Doug.
was really fun for me, being the first one I've ever been to. The booths and all that, that's kind of cool. But just the people attending, that's what I really enjoyed. And we talked about that earlier. It's just the costumes and everybody's in a good mood. Everybody's happy. Everybody's courteous. There wasn't really like grumpy people in the crowds. Everybody's happy to be there. And the costumes and the whole atmosphere. I think that's what I liked most about it.
Yeah, good energy for sure.
Yes, absolutely, lots of good energy.
Well, you have been very gracious with your time, but just like we did with Frank, we like to end with a rapid fire round of lightning questions. Doug, you're gonna go first. So get on your heels, man. Get ready. We'll see how big of a nerd you are. We've already gotten a pretty good sense, but you're definitely in good company here. So, Doug, you go first.
Yeah, the
Absolutely, I could
first,
talk nerdy stuff all day. I really like the. I mean,
yeah.
you never know. I may be back on in the future to talk other
Of course.
video,
Oh
Yes,
yeah,
more
yeah.
in-depth video game stuff. You just never know.
you
Variance.
got it.
Ooh, variance is a rabbit hole in the collecting world that you don't want
I
to go down.
I think we're only at the tip of the iceberg
I
of
think
what
so.
knowledge you may have here.
Yep. I
So
love
to
it.
go into our next bit, your favorite console. I believe you already told us you want to let us know what your favorite console of all time is.
You got to be specific. Don't just say
My
Nintendo. I want to know
my
model.
favorite console of all time is it's got to be just the Super Nintendo. The Nintendo
Yeah.
was like the
I
first that
agree.
I had,
I
but the
love that
Nintendo
console.
was better graphics, and depending on the Super Nintendo that you got, it had a better sound card in it. If you get into the serial numbers,
Hmm.
in a different run of production. You had, better sound, better graphics. You had a lot of the same
Yep.
games that were popular on NES that were redone on the Super NES. So it's
Yep.
almost like playing the exact same game, but
But
just
better.
better graphics and better sound. And honestly, a lot of memories. It
Yeah.
seemed to be the console that most everybody had. So you could always just, instead of bringing your whole console, you could bring a duffel bag of games or whatever with your initial marked on it. And I remember going, and Doug would remember this a lot. I mean, we would go upstairs in our grandma's old farmhouse, and there was like the old wooden edged CTR TV
Yeah.
up
It was an
there
entire
with the old
like
click
cabinet.
knobs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
was. And there would be, anywhere 8 to 15 of us piled in like an 8 foot by 8 foot room,
It,
just
I'm
piled on
surprised
top of
we
each
didn't
other,
fall through the floor. Yeah.
waiting to play, Mortal Kombat or F-Zero or something like that. So it
Yeah.
does have to do with the nostalgia part of it too.
That's
I'm
awesome.
surprised the floor didn't collapse like Doug
Yeah.
said
Yeah.
because we're talking like 100-year-old farmhouse here.
Yeah.
Lots of
That's awesome.
creaking. So But I mean, it was just all the good times. And I mean, that was every holiday. Sometimes it was on just every weekend. I said, a lot of people would get together and shoot firearms. Well, when we were young and not shooting firearms, we were playing video games and whatnot. And
Yeah.
it was just a good pastime, a lot of nostalgia. And that probably rolls into some of my collecting as well.
That's awesome. It's a great console. I couldn't agree with you more. I was always more of a Super Nintendo fan myself. I love the
Yeah.
color palette of it, the FX chip, what they did with parallaxing. Genesis was great. I actually like the Sega CD better than the Genesis, but I always preferred the games on the Super Nintendo. I
Yeah.
don't know, there was something about the color palette. It just popped to me more. I don't know. I'm 100% with
They
you
had
on that.
they had great
Go ahead.
Yeah.
soundtracks too on a lot of
They
their
did.
games. The
Oh yeah.
soundtracks were
Yeah.
rocking. I mean,
Yep.
it was awesome.
Yep.
Yeah.
It was a good one. So the next one you mentioned, and I think you already touched on this, your favorite superhero. I think I'm gonna know what it is. Who is it?
I don't. Well, I'm here to
I'm
tell
gonna
you,
say the
hands
Punisher.
down, no, it's actually not. He's right up there though.
Okay.
It kind of goes in line. It's definitely Batman. I mean,
Ooh,
but the Punisher is a
going
close
There you go.
second.
original.
But there is definitely that crossover of no superpowers. They're just normal people using the skills that they have. Bruce Wayne just
That's
happened to
right.
be a billionaire and a lot
Yeah.
of research and design company, whatnot.
He's
But then
super
the
smart.
Punisher used his raw skills
Yeah.
with his
True.
firearms and his detective knowledge and just his knowledge of the underground more. But it's definitely Batman. That's like the
It's
first
awesome.
superhero movie that I can remember when I was a kid too, and it was just such a huge thing with Michael Keaton. I guess I
Yep.
should say when I was a kid. It was the Michael Keaton version,
Yes.
the Tim Burton Michael Keaton, and it was just amazing to see, a superhero because before that there were some superhero movies, but it was never
Not like
done
that.
to that scale. It was like a lot of
Yeah.
cheesy, almost like made for TV type
Yep.
stuff
Yep.
beforehand.
Yep. They weren't. You couldn't take them seriously. Where
Yeah.
those, you definitely you could. Those were the first like serious attempts at telling a story. Especially
Yeah.
you got Jack Nicholson as the Joker. Holy
Oh
cow.
yeah. It was
Oh.
great.
He did a
Nicole
great job.
Kidman.
Yeah.
Oh
Yep.
yeah.
Nicole Kidman was in there. I mean, just it was
Yep.
loaded.
Yep. It
And
was great.
actually
Well,
Billy D. Williams.
yep. That's
Oh
right.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That's
that's
right.
true. And
He
you had
was
Michelle
Commissioner
Pfeiffer later
Gordon.
on pulling up
Yes.
Catwoman. She did awesome. Great. Just, absolutely great films. That's awesome. All right, Doug, you're up next on the lightning round, man.
All right. Current games you're playing and enjoying, or current stuff you're watching movie wise? Kind of a two-part question.
Well, it is gonna be. I'm actually watching Peaky Blinders right now again, going
Yeah.
back through it with someone who didn't watch it originally, and
Mhm.
that's been a lot of fun because it's been a while since that series kind of wrapped up, and going back to it's been a lot because I've forgotten some of it. So, and then experiencing it with somebody else and seeing all the twists and turns, that's been fun.
That's always
The
cool.
current
Yeah.
game that I'm playing, uh, I actually am not sure how long it's been out, but since watching the Mario movie with my son, he wanted to get
Hmm.
the Switch Super Mario 3D World,
Oh
and
yeah,
so I've been playing
Yeah.
on that just in my spare time. And so I mean
that's
that's
a
been a
great
lot of
game.
fun because it's probably the first Mario game that I've picked up in a long time since like Mario Galaxy. So I mean
Yep.
it's been a while since I picked up a Mario game. I
It's
will have
yeah.
to say I think my phone is dying, and it goes back
It's
to your all's last
Yep.
conversation. I have an Android, so clearly
Oh
it's
no.
dying. I should have plugged it in.
Another dig at
his
Android
his
here.
I
battery's
know.
dying, Doug.
I do love my Android, but I'm going back to the conversation you all had in the previous episode.
Dang.
That's
I thought
okay.
we just said don't talk about that, right? No.
That's okay. We're getting to the near the end of this. Kevin, you have been very generous with your time.
Yes.
Your
Thank you
phone's
very
held out
much.
so far. Thank you. We will definitely have you back. Dude, you are cut from the cloth of the exact reason why we started this podcast was to
Yeah.
share these cool conversations. You are definitely in good company, man. Thank you so much
All
for
right. Well,
being
thanks
here
for
with
Yes,
having
us.
me
thank you.
on, and
Yeah,
maybe we'll talk some nerdy stuff in the future.
we sure will, brother.
Absolutely.
All right. You
Yeah.
take care.